Avram Avinu was tasked with, he has a choice to make, where to get a wife for his son, right? Two choices. Either stay local, okay, or go be or send or get someone from his family back in Haran. So Avram Avinu's the conflict is, I want to get a girl from Haran, but I also don't want my son to leave Eretz Yisrael. So what's worse? The Evid says, if I can't get the girl to come here, should I bring Yitzchak there? So Avram Avinu says, no, that's worse. Bringing Yitzchak to Haran is worse than Yitzchak marrying locally. So Avram Avinu, even though he had made the fellow take an oath, I only take a daughter not from Benos Canaan, but if Yitzchak, it means Yitzchak having to leave, then no, all bets are off. Just don't take Yitzchak out of Canaan. That's worse. Yitzchak having to stay put. How did Avram Avinu know that, let's say, a match with a daughter of Eliezer, Eved Avraham would be bad? Why wasn't that lechatchila his choice? Yeah, because I'll say that his second choice was, yes, okay, I guess find someone local, the best local person you could find for my son if he doesn't have to leave. How did Avram Avinu know that wouldn't work out without resorting to midrashim, a pasuk? So here's how it goes. Originally, Avram Avinu had no children. His own wife, by the way, it says God told Abraham, listen to your wife, whatever she says eventually, right? So his wife is his best advisor. His own wife had told him, you know what? You have to mate with my top student, Hagar Shifchat Sarai. That's her title. Shifchat Sarai is the feminine equivalent of Eliezer Eved Avraham. Number one, like Rabbi Avi Miller points out, Eliezer was assumed to be Avraham Avinu's heir at a certain point. Okay, he's his number two. Everything he does, he's the one in charge. He's a Kan Beito. Okay, he's the elder. So Sarah didn't just pick any woman to be a surrogate mother for her husband. You know, she's going to have to share a husband with now this woman. She picked her finest student. Okay, Egyptian. Yeah, Shifchat Sarai. So that's a title. That's also the Malach referred to as. That's not a bad thing. Like we said before, being called servant of the king, Eved Hashem, is the best title you could hope for in this world. So Avram Avinu had previously seen that even the match with Shifchat Sarai with him, did that work out? No, it didn't. Okay, eventually he had to get rid of that woman and her son. Assuming, I heard something very interesting, God willing. So maybe the person who had this chiddush will himself will say it, so I don't have to ruin it, give a spoiler for what he's going to say. So it didn't work. So Avram Avinu basically knows now, after 60 years of this type of experience, he basically has been said, okay, so I'm not going to want to look for a shidduch with a daughter of Eved Avraham. Even though, yes, he's my prize student, so he probably has perfectly decent daughters, it's not good enough. Okay, because Shifchat Sarai was no good for me. So why would, Eved Avraham be good for my son? Okay, that's just to point it out. By the way, why do they make a holiday of Tu B'Av? What does the Gemara say? What's Tu B'Av about? Right? What's Pshat of Tu B'Av? When do they celebrate this, by the way? What? Shidduchim. So it says Benos Yerushalayim. That means Tu B'Av was observed already when? It says in Jerusalem times. Okay? They did this in Jerusalem. And who participated? Well, it says king's daughters and Kohen Gadol's daughters. And they even would lend each other dresses because, you have to borrow. It has to be something borrowed, something white, not something blue. So from whom can a king's daughter even borrow clothing? So the Kohen Gadol's daughter. Fine. So this seems to be something that was observed. Whoever mentions this at the end of Meseches Tainus, I think is Rashbag says it. Who was it? One of the Tanaim who lived a century after the Churban is talking about what they were told used to be in late Second Temple times, apparently. This is what we used to observe this. Why? Where and when was the Mishnah composed, basically, if you could call it a composition, or compilation is a better way, in the Galilee. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi lived up north, in a place like Sepphoris, okay, where living in Jerusalem was just a dream long ago. So at least the community survived up north, but in the south it was destroyed. So they're talking about what used to be. And they're celebrating the fact that they allowed marriages. So what was the tradition? That intermarriage between the tribes was permissible. So this seems like a minor reason. Like, you can marry out of your tribe. Like, wow, make a holiday, and it's still a holiday almost 1,400 years after the incident that first instigated this. Okay? Especially considering if it was always mutter. The way the Gemara describes it is they were just told that. It turns out it was mutter all along. Okay? And it was just that they realized it. So What's going on here? Let's work backwards. Benos Tzlafkod, we're told they have to marry within their family. Why? Because their male relatives don't want to surrender territory to other tribes. So apparently, everybody took this seriously. Even the Gemara says that maybe it was specific just to them. And people took this very seriously until sometime after, perhaps when Joshua was older, or when even he had just passed away, early times of the judges, when they were told, no, really, you can marry out of the tribes. Okay? Intertribal marriage is permissible. Yay. So that now let's celebrate, and it's going to become a holiday forever. So why would this have any significance in early Mishnaic times, late Second Temple times? The Jews have already, by late Second Temple times, mostly intermarried, so much so that most people already don't know their tribe. Okay? It is basically irrelevant back then. The only Jews who really know which tribes they're from are very specific families, specific game room families, and Kohanim and Leviim. Everybody else is already mixed anyways. So this isn't something that shouldn't be significant especially to Mishnaic Jews. And the answer is, just like the Rambam says, a lot of the Averas that we have in the Torah are what? Why is this an Avera? Why is this a thou shalt not? Because the idol worshippers do that. Okay? A lot that Rambam says, you can understand the Tamei mitzvos, why it is it says that you can't plant certain seeds, kilei akarim, and all sorts of things. Rambam said, I never understood the answer, the reason for these mitzvahs, until I read what? Religious texts from the cults that existed around Avram Avinu's time. Okay? I now understand why the Canaanites and Babylonians, their religion, the Sabaeans and all that, they used to do X, Y, and Z. It says in their books that was their religious practice. So the Torah says, don't do like them. Even though, technically speaking, how I mix my grapes and my wheat or how I cut my hair shouldn't have any effect on how I worship God. But no, that's what they used to do, considered a religious practice, so you can't. Call the Homer, nowadays, when you think archaeology, what's the thing that pops in your head? Quick, free association, archaeology. What do you see when you think archaeology? Words and images.
Stones. Digs.
Well, I think pyramids in Egypt. Okay, archaeology is like, and archaeologists love Egypt. Why? Because the British went there. The archaeologists they had, especially when they had the Rosetta Stone, so it's just like treasure trove of Egyptology. That's it. You think museum, ancient history museum. What do you see? Mummies, Egypt, Sphinx. Right. That's mostly where it is. And then, there's stuff from the Aztecs. And interesting enough, they also built pyramids. They find Babylonians. Oh, look, it's also pyramids. Okay, fine. Pyramids, right? So what do you get there? Nowadays, we know about Egyptian religion a lot more than, let's say, Rambam knew about it, because back then they still hadn't deciphered all the hieroglyphics. So Egyptology has really taken leaps and bounds since the time of the Rambam. And you know what we know about the Egyptians? A lot. You know why? Because they wrote a lot. And you go to the Egyptian, the museums, like the Bible Land Museum, the Israel Museum, they're across the street from each other, very redundant. And they have a lot there. And you see the Egyptians used to do this type of Avodah Zarah, and this was their belief. And I would imagine the Rambam would have a field day and say, look at that. Now that we know what the Egyptians used to do back in the day, like an Egyptian, now I can explain why it is the Torah said, don't do this, and what this means. There's but we don't have the Rambam around. He lived in Egypt, but he lived in Muslim Egypt. So a lot of the old Egyptianness was already gone. Okay, it was buried.
I wonder what he read.
What he read? Well, he tells you the books he read.
Okay,
so Rambam was well read. Okay, he was one. They had shilas. He says all the goyim have shilas. Muslims and Christians alike. Where do they go for all their shilas? To the Rambam. Okay, that was it. He was like, they'll be happy to ask him shilas about history and other things and how to run their country and health and all that. But with regards to religion, they don't want to hear from him. Okay, and you should stop worshiping Jesus. But whatever, that they didn't want to listen to. So Rambam would have a field day. So too, the Rambam says we have these averas. A lot that's in the Mishnah that we have prohibitions for them, especially when you have or just practices. Why do we say something 3 times? Whenever you say something 3 times, it's what? Lehotzimi liban shel tzedukim. The Sadducees and the Baitusians had certain beliefs. So whenever we did anything against what they do, we do it in triplicate, right? Like Hataras Nadarman, we do in triplicate. When we make a siyum, we say Hadron 3 times because they don't believe in Mishnah and Talmud, right? And when they would just cut the Omer right after Motzei Pesach, the Sadducees say, like the Karaites today and like the other heretical sects, it's a Saturday night, not a Tuesday night after Passover, So they say, should I do it now? Yeah, cut the grain, okay, just to show that Lo Tzimi Liban. If you would just read the book of Numbers, the very end, and you get to this pasuk, it says that a woman who's inheriting property cannot marry out of the tribe. It's an explicit verse of the Torah. You need Torah Sheba'al Peh to tell you that this was a one-time rule, and it is not an eternal rule of the Torah. Back then, in Mishnaic times, the Sadducees believed what? If a woman had no brothers and she inherited property from her father, so she somehow has to marry in the tribe. And if she can't marry anybody in the tribe, she doesn't find the proper marriage partner, so she may not marry. Right? Because that's what the Torah says. So this day stayed a holiday among Mishnaic Jews, like many other things in the Mishnah, just because this isn't what they do. They don't allow women to marry out of the tribe, but we celebrate the fact that we know that when Moshe Rabbeinu said that line from God himself, it was God's commandment, no women marrying out, we knew that was perhaps a few years rule until they got everything in order, but no slufka and things like that. But as an eternal rule, it's not. That's why you're not going to find, let's say, in a Shulchan Aruch, by the way, they have Hilchos Nachalos, Nichalot, Rambam has, right? Tells you, here's the rule. A woman inherits property if she has no brothers, right? Does then say, and by the way, and then she has to marry within her family or within her tribe, and so at least marry as close a cousin as she can. Is that such a rule in the Torah? Absolutely not. So now you understand why it is that they had this. Yeah, so you'd be tried. If you were a Sadducee, I wonder if the Karaites still have a rule such as this. By the way, you can't really ask the Karaites any questions. How many people are actually Karaites? And among the Karaites, how many of them are real scholarly Karaites? Yeah, they're not going to have it. So you should ask a Karaite, do you have a situation where a woman's inherited property and you make her marry very close within the family just to keep it safe? Do they still do such a thing? And if they don't, you have to ask them why. And if they start giving you a whole convoluted answer because we have a tradition that says no, and here's how you understand it, so they're basically acknowledging that there is an idea of Torah Sheba'al Peh, like we always point out today. Okay.
The Rambam says one should marry his niece. But
that's about kindness to his brother and sister, his brothers. It's an act of chesed. They marry within because you're gonna they're already close to each other, and it's maybe sarcha al tisalim, but it has nothing to do with inheritance. It means a guy should go look for someone close. Okay. By the way, who still practices things like that? The Hamulot, the Arab clans around here. Really, there's no Palestinian people, obviously. Just various groups, villages and Hamulot, who are at war with each other. And some Hamulas are less anti-Semitic than others. So they marry within. Why? To preserve property, to strengthen the group.